So it is my privilege to get to introduce Ben Muldrow. Ben is a community branding and marketing expert who has spent the last 18 years assisting communities develop identities that attract investors and encourage private and public organizations to commit to community development projects that lead to economic vitality, environmental stewardship, and social advancement. As a partner at Arnett, Muldrow & Associates, Ben has designed creative branding and marketing systems in over 600 communities across 40 states and 5 countries, making him a true global leader in place branding and cementing his ability to combine strategic planning, brand development, interactive marketing, public relations, and social media capabilities to preserve and promote the power of place. Ben Muldrow.
So I think I get points for getting every buzzword in that bio. Every single urban planning buzzword is collected in one paragraph. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Ben Muldrow. We're going to have a little bit of fun tonight. I guarantee this will be the most entertaining 3 to 4 hours of your day. No, I'm kidding. I want to thank you all for the great introductions, and this is such a great opportunity for the community. First, shout out to Lee and everybody over at MEDC and the Michigan Main Street Center. We've been doing branding processes for Michigan Main Street communities for well over a decade now. Lapeer is the 30th community in Michigan that I've worked with. I'm starting to feel like this is my second home. I was in the state last week. I'm spending quite a bit of time here, finding all the good donut places, and Max's definitely did not disappoint. It was really, if you heard in the introductions, you heard Wes say that he's lived here for 40 years. And I just want to say, as a community, it's really, really nice of you all to allow a newcomer to get involved with the community the way that he has. We heard folks kind of say this is one of those communities where if your grandparents weren't from here, then we still kind of are a little suspect. And I come from a place that's very similar to that, so I appreciate that kind of mindset. We're going to jump right in. I've got a lot of stuff to show you and share with you tonight, but I do want to say one of the things that's so exciting about this is because of the work of the partnership, we were able to really go out and hit on a lot of things that we typically couldn't. The normal scope of a process like this is we come in, we look only at the downtown, and we look only at the Main Street program, because that's where the funding is coming from. But because you had these entities that said, we want to work together, we want to be able to leverage our own efforts and resources to be able to show the community that we are working as one, we were able to create tools that went all levels. So I also want to say that if you are a representative of any of those organizations, no one gave me permission to do this, and no one has seen this. So I get to ask forgiveness instead of permission. But I think it's really good for you all to see the recommendations as a full system. So I just want to jump right in. I know if you're coming to a branding presentation, the first thing that you're guessing is, let's get right to the graphics, right? Show me what the logo looks like. But before we do that, we have to really understand the community. So I wanted to share a couple things that I thought were interesting observations as we went through. First of all, from an overall standard in the community, you've got almost 9,000 population. You've got a poverty rate that's a little bit higher than the state's. You've got a median property value that's lower than the state average and a median household value that's lower than the state average. Those are pretty much proportionally on par. So what that means is even though your folks are making less money, the properties are a little easier to get into. So it's just a lower cost of living. Those are things that we all know that we want to focus on growing and enhancing a little bit. Got some really interesting job numbers though. We heard the phrase bedroom community used often. We're a bedroom community. So here's what those numbers actually look like. You have 583 people that live in the city limits and work in the city limits. You have 25, almost 2,600 people that leave every day to go to work. But you have 7,700 people that come into the city. You have 3 times more people that come here to work than you do leave here to go to work. Is that surprising to anybody? A little bit shocking. Now, the next thing that we did was we asked the question, for the people that are leaving to go to work, where they're going? Oh, they're going to Detroit. They're working in Detroit. Well, that didn't bear out to be the case. The overwhelming majority of the people that are leaving are actually traveling west and going to the Flint market. You have almost equal numbers that are driving north out of the city to go to work as you do driving south out of the city to go to work. The thing that is interesting, and I know that you can't really see it from the charts, but the lighter the color, the farther they drive. So the people that drive the farthest are the ones that drive south. Therefore, they complain most about their commute. Therefore, they're the ones that you think, like, that's what you hear most. You know, so it's one of those things from an anecdotal standpoint, everybody said, yeah, the most of our people are going south to Detroit. But in actuality, they're not driving quite as far, and they're driving to the Flint market. So being able to understand those things, that really changes our dynamic. If the overwhelming majority of our citizens are 55 to 75 miles away at work, then we know what time they're going to get back. But if they're only 18 miles or 22 miles, then that changes the scenario quite a bit. So we have to understand that all before we build the message. One of the fantastic slides, right, is what in the world do all these mean? What this really shows you, this is a breakdown of housing by cost, okay? You don't need to know the specific details. Just know that when you see an orange bar, that's how many in your category, how many in that category Lapeer has, versus the national average. You beat the national average in less than $10,000. You beat the national average in 10 to 15, beat the national average, beat the national average, beat that national average. So these super low cost properties, 25,000 and lower, you're killing the national average. You're kind of on par, then start beating the national average again in $70,000 range. And then literally, once you hit the $175,000 range, you're nowhere close to the national average. So what that means is overall housing stock is a lot lower valued, and you don't have the full distribution of housing value, housing price point. So again, this is not the kind of thing that's like, oh God, this is horrible, let's pack everything up. It just means that one of the things that we might need to realize is we heard some talk about talent recruitment. We heard some talk about getting people to choose making Lapeer their residency. We need to make sure that we have the housing diversity to be able to attract those people and draw them in. This one, what this actually does is this breaks down the jobs that you have in your city by their categories. So you see the bigger the block, the more jobs. So manufacturing, healthcare, social assistance, education services, that big teal one, accommodation, food services, retail trade. So you can kind of see what kind of jobs you do have. You've got a lot of people coming into the community to work retail type jobs. You've got a lot of manufacturing jobs, healthcare and assistance. So probably, if we went and looked at the numbers, the 2,500 that are leaving the community to go to work are probably earning more on average than the 7,700 coming in to work. Okay, so again, those are some stats we need to know. And then one of the other things, and again, I know these are horrible slides. I just wanted to show you, look at all the hard work I did in the past 24 hours. What we actually did is we ran a comprehensive retail leakage study for the community. Now, national retailers typically look at drive time radiuses. Most of them explore what they call a 5, 10, 15. So they'll look at 3 different drive time radiuses from a particular spot. So I ran that same study, and I just want to share a couple numbers with you that I think are interesting. If you look at 10 minutes in any direction from the heart of your downtown, the retailers in that area are selling $428 million worth of goods. It's a pretty good market, okay? All in all, you are a huge retail gainer. You are bringing retail in from the region. Well, when you have a Meijer and a Kohl's and all the stuff that you have, that's not a surprise to anybody. You are winning in a lot of categories, but there still very much are categories that you are losing in. And the categories that you're losing in are categories that are appropriate for us to locate in our historic downtown. Categories like furniture and home furnishings, $5.6 million. Clothing boutiques, $8 million leaving the community for clothes. Now, you don't have to capture all that. A couple of boutiques pulling in $800,000 each are going to be really successful businesses. But the interesting thing about clothing boutiques, has anybody ever bought clothes before? Right? Everybody once or twice. There are some of you that I think are probably professionals at it, while others might still be amateurs. But the thing that we know about clothing sales do better in clusters. If you have one clothing boutique in a downtown, it will struggle. If you have 3 within walking distance of one another, they will thrive. A consumer needs to feel like they've seen enough options to have the consumer confidence to pull the trigger. Okay? So that's something that we want to look at, not just going after clothing boutiques, but actually going after a strategic cluster of boutiques so you can get that consumer confidence to buy. And then this kind of miscellaneous downtown-oriented retail, another 3.3 million, gift shops, bookshops, all those type things that you would expect to see in a traditional downtown. Now you have a couple other categories that are importing customers in from around. Restaurants. You are killing it in restaurants. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean we don't need any more restaurants? Well, no, you can always have more restaurants. It's just better restaurants. You know, you're at a point where your restaurants are living because customers are coming from outside of that 10-minute drive time. That doesn't surprise any of us. But one of the things that happens is when a market reaches a restaurant saturation point like you have, what you hope to see is you hope to see the time that the market starts to separate the wheat from the chaff. The time when the mediocre restaurants with poor service and unreliable food go by the wayside and are replaced by more reliable products in a variety of price points. But you're doing really, really well in restaurants. General merchandise, that's your big boxes, your Walmarts and Meijers and that kind of thing. You are in almost perfect equilibrium there, so you look really good there. You're also bringing in a ton of business in pharmacy. So people are coming in to do that kind of work, that kind of business here. And that's everything from your chains to your fantastic downtown pharmacy that literally feels like you walk into a 1955 pharmacy. It's such a cool thing to have. So that kind of lays a lot of that foundation of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. We've got a lot of really good things out there. One of the great things about seeing leakage numbers like that is it means we don't have to invent money. That's one of the hardest things to do in our career, is inventing money. The money exists and the consumers are already spending it. So the thing that we have to do is we have to try to capture it. We have to think about the declining vacancy rates that we have and the spaces that we have available, and how do we match that up with the business type that makes the most sense. How do we help existing businesses make their square footage work for them even better? How do we introduce the idea of expansion or diversification of their inventory to maximize their presence in the community? So then from there, it takes us into the brand values. These are the way that we kind of approach brand development is when you develop a brand in a community, it's different than doing it in a company. Because when you're in a company, there's a boss. And the boss gets to say, that's what I want to do. And it doesn't really matter what anybody else says. In a community, there's no boss. Everybody's the boss. Like, you can't, I don't know if you realize it or not, but you can't make people in a community do anything. Like, that's not how it works. You operate off of a completely different mindset. Where corporate branding is about consistency through control, in a community branding is consistency through expansion, adaptability, and inspiration. Okay, so what we did is we went through, we looked at all the things that already existed. These are a couple of the logos that we pull out. We've got the Chamber of Commerce featuring this courthouse building. We've got the LDC, the Development Corporation. We've got the city logo. We've got the DDA logo that says Lapeer downtown. One of the first things that jumped out to me is there are a lot of logos using script typeface. Now, you use script for two reasons. You either use it because you say, well, our community's pretty, so we need a pretty typeface. I mean, let's be honest, like the decision-making process is not necessarily all that sophisticated. Hey, we're pretty, so let's pick a pretty typeface. Or, when you look at your name, you realize that there's some odd spacing that occurs between that capital L and the A and the P, especially if you use all capital letters. So I wanted to dig in and see if I could find something that would allow us to have consistency where these guys are all using script, but they're not using the same script. So there's no connectivity between any of these. They all are fine, but they're not coordinated in any way, shape, or form. How do you create connective tissue with still being able to maintain the autonomy of those entities? So the other thing that we wanted to introduce is we want to introduce this concept of a destination brand. Up until this point, every single logo that you have in the community is essentially an organizational logo. The Lapeer downtown is maybe a little confused. You know, it's like, wait, who is this? So that's more of, this is the place we're promoting, now who's promoting it, right? So what we want to do is we want to use a system similar to what colleges and universities use, where they have an academic logo and an athletic logo. We want to create a well thought out organizational strategy, and then we want to introduce this destination brand. So we're going to start with the destination brand. And the first thing that I did was go out and select colors. Now, believe it or not, you don't have to use high school colors for your community brand. In fact, there are a lot of reasons not to. There are a lot of reasons that can potentially be a pitfall. I'm going to create a complete hypothetical, okay? Let's say that you have a school district that's going out for a referendum to ask for higher taxes to build new buildings. Completely hypothetical, right? Some people don't like that, you know? When you decide to put all of your eggs in the school spirit basket, then you are now putting the brand equity at the hands of a single organization and their organizational decisions. So we understand that there's pride built into school colors, but we also understand that there's a lack of control over those decisions sometimes. So how do we create a palette that makes sense with our community? Now, when I drove in yesterday, and yesterday was the first time that I had ever been into the historic downtown of the community, and I was blown away. Thought the community looked fantastic, very, very well kept, very attractive. And the first thing that came to mind, and I know I'm a nerd, but it was the first thing that came to my mind was, what's up with all these cupolas at all the gateways? What are these cupolas? These are really interesting. You don't see this very often. This is not the way that cities typically choose to denote gateways. I saw them at city gateways. I saw them again repeated in downtown gateways. I saw them repeated again on the farmer's market. Like, I'm connecting all those dots on my own, but I don't know where they come from. But the one thing that did stick out to me is there's a color palette from all these elements, but then it doesn't necessarily match with what the city is using. Got this royal blue on a sign right next to this collection of far more traditional colors. So what I actually did was I took several photos of those cupolas throughout the community, and I derived the 6-color color palette from those. I picked colors, I made them a little bit more saturated, a little bit more vibrant. You can't tell on screen, but because I wanted it to make sure that it wasn't dated or too stale. But that was the foundation of our colors. Things that we already know exist in your community and will be repeated over and over again. So again, it's one of those things where it's like, holy moly, there's a strategy behind the colors. So now if you say, well, I don't really like that color, it's like, I get you don't like it, but what's your strategic suggestion instead? Because we at least know where these come from. They come from something that's going to be repeated over and over again. When we design a sign, it will be complemented by the cupolas. when we design banners, they will be complemented by the resources and investments that we've already made. So then from there, we wanted to look at typefaces. Now, I will tell you, I heard over and over again, this is it's a small town, it's a warm place, it's a traditional community. I wanted to select a traditional typeface, but not one that was stale. So this top one is called Sagona. It's a serif typeface. I'm gonna jump ahead real quick and show you this. I went to college just to learn what serifs were. The technical word for these is doohickeys. So when a typeface has these, it's called a serif typeface, and when it doesn't have them, it's called a sans serif typeface. So serif typefaces are far more traditional. They're also much easier to read. The serifs allow the eye to distinguish between the letters. Now, that's not always true, but it allows, we're used to seeing it. We're used to seeing it and kind of know what certain letters look like. Where a sans serif typeface is actually designed to be content neutral. You just made a face, and I know that face. It's like, it feels so sterile, it feels so cold. But the interesting thing about sans serif typefaces is they can be used to kind of put personality into, so they can be very useful. So what I've done is I've selected a serif traditional primary and then a sans serif secondary. So we have that opportunity to be a little contemporary in the combination of the two. And I think as you'll start to see it, the primary is just a really, really nice selection for your name. And then I did go back and I picked a script for an accent. But these suckers are hard to read. We're going to use them in the places where we want somebody to stop, take the time, and dig into what we're saying. This is not the kind of typeface that shows up on our wayfinding signage. You know, this is the kind of stuff that it's a more intimate communication one-to-one. So once you define the typefaces, that leads to what we call a word type. And the thing that I really wanted you all to have is I wanted you to have a consistent way that we say Lapeer. I wanted it to look the same every single time an organization used it, because that's the thing you have in common. So what I did was I created this custom word type. It's custom spacing. We changed out the center bar and the A to bring in this kind of visual nod to the river that runs right through the heart of your community. And just to kind of show you, this is, up top is what it looks like when you just type it out. But I went in, I changed the spacing. If you notice the little center bars on the E's, I moved them up just so that everything was in nice, perfect alignment. But what this does is this gives us an opportunity to stitch together things without saying, hey, we're going to force everybody to look exactly alike. This is just our name. This is the identity we share. So then from there, I think about these values that we heard over and over again. Somebody used the term oasis. It was kind of interesting. They were talking about when you drive north and you hit Oxford, and you get through Oxford, you kind of feel like you've reached the end of the world. And, you know, you drive through this, and you all might not, but people that live in Detroit think that they've literally hit the edge. It's like, we're in the wilderness, you know? So there's this interesting dynamic with a community that has that kind of geography. You have that, I call it the place to exhale. You know, when you have to leave and then you return, you have that spot that you hit and you truly feel like maybe the tension and stress, you kind of relieve and you feel like you're back in the place you know. That's something I really like. You've still maintained a lot of those values of being a small town. You're charming. You've got this great history and stories to tell, strong connections. We had some interesting conversations, and I want to be blunt. You know, we heard people say, you know, we might be a little bit warmer to visitors than we are once you live here. and I kind of get that. You know, it's like sometimes when you live in a community that maybe has a little bit of grit, you know, you kind of rub each other the wrong way every now and then. That's fine. That makes sense. But all in all, we really felt like there was a lot of warmth and a lot of focus on people living together. So that really inspired this next couple of slides that we just call a brand statement. This was the thing that kind of led us to the overall direction. So I'm going to read this for you. Welcome to historic Lapeer. Named for the stone that lined the bed of our river, we are a vibrant small town where our residents proudly walk in the footsteps of fur traders and natives. We are born with an independent spirit, and that spirit has lived with us from the early days of dueling courthouses to the east-west rivalries of dueling high schools. We are an unusual oasis, close enough to be truly connected, far enough to be a place of home. We are proud of our past and excited for our future. From our cool new businesses, coffee shops, restaurants, and boutiques, to the huge support for the theater and the arts. We invite you to discover the place we call home and discover why we say historic Lapeer, remarkably close. So that simple phrase of remarkably close, it gives us that opportunity to kind of talk about a quality of human interaction while also making this kind of geographic competitive advantage. You know, we're the kind of place that we're easy to get to. And that's a message that makes sense, especially from a downtown standpoint. You know that you want to bring people into the community to build that retail market. So being able to make that competitive advantage to them is very valuable. So when all that stuff kind of ties in together, you end up having something that looks kind of like this. You know, you take that graphic element that you've already been using in certain ways throughout the community, you tie it in with the colors, you tie it in with the word type, and then you introduce with that kind of hand script that remarkably close. And again, like I say, I know that it's hard to read. That's fine. We want people to slow down and take that in. But what's nice about a system like this is you start to dig in and you start to see it works in one color. You can create a lot of different versions so that you always have the right tool for the right time. Sorry for those of you in the back. I know it's a little blown out in with the light, but you start to have a system that truly gives you the tools to tell that story. It's professional, it's clean, it's easy to roll out and use. But then from there, if we stopped there, we'd only be given a little part of this and it wouldn't really work. How do we connect everything together? So we wanted to start looking at those organizational identities. So we start with the city. This is a graphic pulled straight off their website. Again, what do we see? We see one of the domes of the cupola, but because of the single use, somebody might think it's the dome of the courthouse. Well, then somebody else who likes to argue would say, why are we using the dome of the courthouse? That's a county building. Like, doesn't that make Lenny mad that Dale's using the, you know, so it's just one of those things where it was very deliberately designed, but you might not necessarily know what you're saying. And what you can do here is, I think the city needs to reintroduce a seal. A seal is a very formal graphic. It's something that uses it kind of as a formal representation of the actions of the community. And taking those elements, you can create something that's very nice and attractive, but more formal, more ornate. It kind of pays tribute to you are this community that is surrounded by country and surrounded by nature. People proudly said that they liked that you could go 5 minutes in any direction and be in the middle of nothing. That was something that you really seemed to like. So having this formal tool and then being able to tie that in with the word type, you have a design distinction between the city government itself and the way that you're marketing your community, but it's still using the same tools from the same toolbox. So now all of a sudden, you start to see the elements come together. I don't know why I did that. But now we jump to the downtown and the DDA, okay? So what is the DDA? What is Main Street? I don't really know. Who needs to know? Those are all questions from an organizational standpoint that we need to understand. But with this, what we wanted to do is we wanted to take advantage of this new kind of renewed connection with Michigan Main Street and with a statewide and nationwide network. So we wanted to introduce this idea of Michigan Main Street. Michigan Main Street and the idea of Main Street is something that is a little bit easier for us to help people understand. But then if you see over on the far side, has this very simple tool that simply says funded by DDA. DDA is not something that people typically get overly excited about. It's like, oh, I've decided to volunteer for this amazing organization funded by Tax Increment Financing District. Like, what are you talking about? You know, that's not the kind of things that people really understand, but I've decided to volunteer for an organization who is focused on bringing vibrancy back to our historic downtown and bringing our Main Street to life. Okay, I can buy that. So it gives you the opportunity to really address both where the support comes from, but then also what this entity is. And with the icon, I like to use these 4 different colors from the palette to help tell the story of both the 4-point approach of the Main Street model and the 4 committees of the organization, which are organization, economic vitality, design, and promotion. So then from there, we look at the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber's got this great logo, also featuring the courthouse that we're in. Now, chambers are funny. Chambers everywhere across the country, they do these funny things with their names. There'll be the Lapeer Chamber of Commerce, then the Lapeer Area Chamber of Commerce, then the Greater Lapeer Area Chamber. Like it's one of those things that we see a lot. And at the end of the day, what does everybody call it? The chamber, right? So being able to have that versatility, what I wanted to do with the chamber is I wanted to show them how could they incorporate the brand without really changing their logo, just kind of subtly evolving down the road. So I kept the exact same graphic, and then I tied it in with the word type. So you start to see that this gives you that opportunity to kind of slowly evolve without feeling compelled to get rid of anything that you've had previously. And then I added in on that far side one that simply says Lapeer Chamber. That kind of simplified, clean version for smaller use. On the county level, again, the county has a seal, and it's just exactly what you would expect it to be. It's a circle, says Lapeer County with the courthouse in it. But being able to have that opportunity to have kind of a graphic set that helps people to distinguish between the county and the city. That is one of the things that most citizens won't ever really understand. Who's in charge of what? Who's doing what? You know, wait, so the county is in the city? I'm confused. At least we're not in Virginia, because in Virginia, when you have a city is not actually part of a county. Yeah, so that's weird. Imagine having a county and city that are trying to market themselves, but the county doesn't want to say anything about the city that is in the middle of this weird donut hole. So, interesting dynamics, but being able to tie in and show that very, very subtle gesture of adopting the word type, but really preserving that iconic image that evokes so much pride about the county government and about this place and this historic courthouse. Development Corporation, again, the Development Corporation, if what I heard is right, is the director retiring, is that right? So with that kind of turnover in leadership, this might be a perfect time to think about kind of bringing a new face when a new leader comes on board for that organization. So again, having somebody that's kind of focused on economic growth, you want that organization to look a little bit more contemporary, want them to participate well in the economic development arena. So you have this kind of stylized L. And then you move into the brand extension. So once you have the foundation, how do we make its way out into our events? The events are the places where the positive connections with communities really happen. So again, everything you're going to see some of the current marketing and then just showing an adaptation here. I think that this is a fantastic event. When you see art like this, if you have ever been involved with a cruise in, you will understand that they like ornate designs, they like ornate posters, and they like ornate t-shirts. And by God, you have to change them every year. And you have to put a different car on them. Because if you have the same brand, then, you know, Mopar people will hate you for featuring Ford 2 years in a row. And, like, we get how that works. So this is not intended to replace that. This is your simplified, consistent graphic element. It's the thing that lives year over year so that you can freely change and update your art for your merchandise and for your marketing. Winterfest, again, super simple. You got a great event going on, but being able to create this simple way to connect all the different things that go on through the holiday season. Ladies' night out, I will tell you, I've been doing this long enough that I have started to stage a protest on high heels and shopping bags for ladies' night out logos. I feel like our ladies are more sophisticated than that. So I like to have this opportunity to do something a little bit more contemporary, that's a little bit more focused on the feel, the vibrancy that you're going to have. But again, I think that this plays well with everything that you all are kind of working on. You do some killer events in October. You do lots of walks and runs and stuff. So one of the things I'm showing here is this could be the opportunity where you actually expand out your typeface. You can use kind of a holiday themed typeface throughout the entire month. So what I'm showing is I'm showing this idea of Halloween in Lapeer and then creating a set of connected logos for all these different events. And this isn't even everything. I mean, you've got the treat walk, you've got all these different things that go on, but connecting those dots so people realize, wow, you know, we're really doing a lot to make this community come to life. That doesn't mean come to life, I said, you know, come to life for the zombie run, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't have really, really amazing art in your marketing, but you've got this consistency year over year. When we have volunteer-run organizations, there is a tendency for the volunteers that put on events to literally want to trash everything they did last year and make it look completely different the next year so that it feels fresh to them. But they kind of forget the fact that our customers need to know that this is the same thing that they had a good time at last year. So having that design consistency goes a long way. Summer concert series, again, being able to have something that's cool and fresh. We had a fantastic meeting with high school and middle school students yesterday. And one of the things that they begged for was we have so many students who are passionate about music. We have so many students that are in bands. Give us an opportunity for voice. Give us an opportunity for these actual events for us to be able to play for our community. So you know, being able to have this ongoing series. I think one of the things that we typically do in communities is we program and we make things part of our law. And literally, if you just set up an opportunity to open a new power park to feature these kind of quick, strike, hop concert, that could be a great way to hit a couple different elements at the same time. Here is one of those traditions that I don't know anybody else does this. I've never heard of this before. And then just visually and finding images all throughout history. So it's really an opportunity to build that place like security entities. And you see, you know, we make sure this is one of those places like we do with the school. The community brand never supersedes the school brand. The blue and green or the lightning are the blue and green and the lightning. We show how they can incorporate that word and still keep their colors the same. Now, a couple other ideas that I want to throw out your way. One thing is what we call right-sized retail. And you have a historic downtown, which means you have retail spaces that are sized for 1880s businesses. And we run businesses a little bit different in 2019. So I'll give you a quick kind of study. My mom's a math teacher, so I really like numbers. In America, the average square footage of a historic retail space is about 1,800 square feet. So if you factor in the national average on retail commercial square footage, then that means that a business would be paying about $1,986 a square foot. Now that's going to be high for here, but your proportions are still going to make sense. So you've got $1,986. Well, that means that a business owner is going to have to sell $4,000 worth of merchandise just to pay rent. Then you add in all the other stuff and maybe pay staff members or ever want to make a salary. You know, the math is very, very difficult. So what we've started to see is reformatting the space, taking the back space for office and then maintaining the front bay for retail so that as you walk down the street, you still get the retail density, but you also have a floor and a square footage that really works for both the occupants and the building owners. So just a little bit of math. If you were to take the national national average in office rate and take the back third of that space and charge national average for office, then all of a sudden, that retailer goes from spending $1,900 a month on rent to $825 on rent. Or even better, you go through and you give the majority of the back to office and create a small micro retail bay up front. You can almost give that away for free and still make more money off of your office tenants. So being able to have those dynamics where you might have a really great occupancy rate, but do you have the consistent retail as you walk down the street to achieve a retail destination in people's minds? So I'll show you a couple quick examples. This is from the community that I live in now. This is an engineering firm right in the heart of our downtown. Is anybody in the audience an engineer? Good. Engineers can be funny, right? A little awkward. All these offices up front were unoccupied because they said they were too hot. So literally you have this building taking all this dead space of sidewalk and the storefront square footage isn't even being used by the tenant. So we broke that up into a series of micro retail bays that were literally one office deep, and we were able to introduce 3 new businesses to the community. Break down that gap in the retail feel from the sidewalk side, create a little bit more revenue for the property owner, and save the tenant some money. So these simple concepts, this is something that I think might make a lot of sense for you guys here in Lapeer. You've got a lot of service industry on the first floor that might have somewhat moderately used or inefficiently used space on the front end of their space. So it might be something that they could fit in there. The next thing that I want to introduce to you is the idea of what we call Vibrant Lapeer. Vibrant Lapeer is a series of very small incentive grants that are focused on creating life and color in the community. As beautiful as the community is, as I walked up and down the sidewalks, it didn't really feel like the businesses were particularly alive. Now, I was assured it was because it's still winter here. Said if I come back in a couple more weeks, it's going to feel like summer and everything will happen. But you want things spilling out onto the sidewalks. You've got a great streetscape, you've got great and ample space, but anything from chairs, benches, flags, flowers, umbrellas, bistro tables, plantings, interactive art. People love games. Throw some cornhole out and that kind of stuff. I can't wait to see what's going to happen out in front of Jenny's place. You've got this perfect kind of interaction where the building sets back and you've got this kind of safe lawn space that could just be a perfect place for people to gather and for you to see people loving where they are. And I will tell you, for the longest time, we were convinced in our communities that if we were going to invest in amenities like benches, we had to bolt those suckers down in every single corner. You know, it's like, we're going to decide where you sit, we're going to bolt it down and you can't ever change it. And now people are really moving more towards this idea of let the people decide how they want to use the space. We're seeing a lot of use of folding chairs and bistro chairs on county squares, and every morning you go out and they're kind of clustered up in different ways, and that's okay. Some great examples here. This was actually a guerrilla wayfinding campaign that was done by a master's student in Raleigh, North Carolina. He went out in the middle of the night and put up all these signs throughout the community that told people how to get to see cool things, whether walking or biking. Nobody in the city knew who was responsible for it, but everybody assumed a different department had done it because it looked so good. So they were up for like well over a month before they found out that they weren't authorized. And then they took them down, and when they took them down, the community was in such uproar that the city turned around, remade them to be permanent, and installed them and put them up there. And great example over here on this top one, you probably can't see it, but in the bottom right-hand corner of the sign, there's a Blue Cross Blue Shield logo. It was actually sponsored by a healthcare provider in the community to do this wayfinding. So this might be a great way to kind of get pedestrian and bike scale wayfinding and have a partnership with local healthcare providers. In addition to that, just seeing the cleverness and the things that surround us. If you notice, whenever you cross the street, you have these little tactile strips that are in play. This community made them all look like welcome mats. What better way to play into that idea of the county's front porch than, introducing that welcome mat into the community? It's kind of a cool little feature. People are doing some cool things with crosswalk art, whether you're hopscotching across the street or, just doing 3D art into the crosswalks. There really is an interesting way of enhancing walkability while also introducing public art into your community. They even sponsored, you can find some money every now and then. I hate that, but again, it's good to see. Merchandise. Most of the time, people don't have a way to show their pride in where they live other than high school apparel. So being able to make merchandise that people want to have. And I remember I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and several years ago she said, I want a swell bottle. I was like, swell bottle? I mean, okay. Like, she literally was asking like she wanted a car, And so I went to the store, and it was $45. I was like, what is the deal with this $45 water bottle? Apparently they have fairies that live inside that keep your beverage hot or cold. But, the reason that I show this is for the longest time, every time we made logoed merchandise, our decision-making process on the front end was to find the cheapest possible starting product. We were convinced that the customer didn't want to pay to show their connection. We were actually apologetic about the whole idea. So being able to put your logo on a premium item with a brand that people know and recognize is hugely important. What you actually do is you co-opt their value. If you want to reposition this community as an outdoor recreation mecca, then you create some Patagonia jackets with Lapeer logos next to it. If you want to go through and you want to connect with cyclists, then you find bike vendors and connect the dots. Does that make sense? So, being able to go through and create some premiums is a really, really important tactic to understand and deploy. The other thing that's really important is having clothing that people want to wear. If you do have a community shirt, it's probably what I call a car wash shirt. It's the kind of shirt that has like 900 logos on the back, and it's so ugly that you only paint the house or cut the grass in it, Having things that people want to own. One of the cool things about this branding process is these tools become available to our business community. They are urged to make products that are profitable to them. We do not villainize profit. We encourage it. We want businesses to benefit off the emotional connection that people have with the community. I think that's one of the biggest things that's different about this approach. A lot of times you think about branding, and typically we have people say, well, are we going to trademark this? Trademark it from what? What's the damage that's going to be caused? Is a community next door going to decide to change their name to Lapeer? Like, that's not how copyright works. Like, if you want to invest in anything, have a really nasty letter on file that says, quit doing that, It's like the hand slap. But all in all, I've been doing it for almost 20 years. People inherently want to do good. They might make some mistakes because they don't know better, but it's not on purpose. It's not to be hurtful. I've had one situation in 18 years. So it's really something that you should be able to remove any barriers, remove any speed bumps, and make the resources available. Being able to take that and make its way into a comprehensive wayfinding system, you've got some fantastic gateways now. Gateways are very impactful. Once you see the gateway, you then pick up with what we call trailblazer signs. The trailblazer signs feature 3 destinations. As you move into your downtown core, those are going to scale down. They're going to be intended to be both vehicular and pedestrian scale signs simultaneously. What you see here are signs that would all fit into the federal MUTCD standards. That's the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a stunning document that you should all read in your free time. Yeah, exactly. But one of the things that is so important is a lot of times we over-design these. We make them too complicated. We make them too expensive. We make them too hard to replace when somebody drives through them. So making sure that you have something that very confidently continues on that brand, and it uses those colors throughout the community. With your banner system, same thing with banners. When we design our banners, oftentimes we start with a white computer screen. So we end up designing something that adds more clutter into the community than clarity. So I've got a couple different things. What you see here is a very simple design that's intended for a pole that has mounts on both sides, a more simplified version with a single pole. And then when you get into a spot where you're predominantly all pedestrian oriented, you can go with the super ornate that features art or features photos and that kind of thing. So around the square itself, around the farmer's market space, you might be able to have a series of those full color ones. But you want to create rhythm. You want to create repetition. You want people to have these banners teach them that, hey, as I drive through the community, I feel like I just drove past something that I probably should have seen. Your community has an interesting dynamic where there are a lot of people that would say they've been to Lapeer and they've never come downtown. So we want to make sure that we use banners to help fight that tendency. Something else that's really exciting is an initiative to go through and enhance the lighting in the community, change some of the lighting that exists, start to evolve what we call Cobra head lights, these super tall lights that are intended for super highways. You seem to have them in your historic downtown. So being able to remove those, replace them with period lighting, and then also enhance the lighting that you have to be efficient lighting and properly directed lighting. So we're calling that Illuminate Lapeer. I'm calling that Illuminate Lapeer. I don't know what you're going to call it yet, but I think that's a clever name. But being able to kind of take that and connect all those dots with those initiatives. And then finally, just being able to kind of tell the story. I created a template to be able to put together some ads, and these are just a couple of the photos that I took over since yesterday. And it just shows you, it starts to create a very confident tone. It was so cool to be able to see the farmer's market set up and some honking asparagus that the guys was like, no, I know you're just visiting, but you really should buy these asparagus. I did not buy the asparagus, but they did look good. Beautiful restoration going on in this building. And then, of course, just this idea that you truly do have an American classic here. Now, okay, that's great. You did a lot of work. Where do we go from here? So one of the cool things about this process and this technical visit is it's focused on getting the tools in your hands. So by the end of the day tomorrow, I'm going to be providing the community, first of all, with a comprehensive style guide. It defines all the typefaces, all the colors, tells you how to use this, how not to break this, okay? Then from there, we've also included a brand launch strategy guide. This gives in a single page all of the different things that you need to consider in the long-term rollout of this. There is no right way to roll it out. There is your way to roll it out. But before you can decide that on your own, you have to know what are the things we should be thinking about. I've already created what we call a How to Be a Brand Partner page. This is intended for additional organizations, event organizers, and businesses in our community. And it simply gives them a whole list of ideas that they might be able to incorporate the brand element in what they do. And if you do any one of these, you're a brand partner. You know, it's a simple way to kind of get the creative juices flowing. And then the final thing that we're going to share is what we call a brand score sheet. And this brand score sheet will give the partnership the opportunity to revisit this in 12 months, sit down and score the implementation, and helps them to constantly keep in their sights the low-hanging fruit and the things that makes most sense for them to prioritize next in the rollout. So with that, that's what I was able to do since yesterday. I'm going to take a nap. No, I'm kidding. But before we wrap, I would love, I know we've gone a little bit over. I try to keep it right at an hour, and we're about 5 after 7. But I'd love to open it up for thoughts, comments, anything that you want to make sure that we hear and take away. Yes, sir, in the back. All this was funded through MEDC and the Michigan Main Street program. So this was actually, this technical visit was provided to the community because the community is a Main Street community.
So through the state of Michigan, so our taxpayer dollars pay for you to do all this, essentially?
MEDC is a public-private partnership. I can't really say.
Right. All these logos and all this stuff all look beautiful. You did a great job. But all that costs money. And you said the median income around here is $34,000.
I know. So,
how do people pay for all this?
okay, so here's the deal. That's like, I mean, you chose to be the first one to say, and I'm going to respond back to it. That's literally the worst way to think about this. Every single one of these logos that I showed is connected to an organization that exists and is doing things now. Literally changing your profile pic, incorporating it in the marketing that you're currently doing, incorporating it into telling your story and doing your mission costs nothing. Zero cost. It costs zero. It was developed and the tools are being made available. Now, long term, absolutely. Wayfinding is expensive. Should that be a first priority? No, absolutely not. But there are so many elements. When you look at the implementation checklist, there are so many low cost and no cost elements. It is all about considering the things that we're already doing and finding the ways that we can incorporate those in. And look, I understand that you are skeptical of that, but this works. I can give you example after example after example. You drive to Grayling, Michigan right now, community of 1,800 people. Their demographics look no better than yours. Their socioeconomics look no better than yours. And their overall population number is a quarter of yours. And the growth that they have seen, the new investment that they have seen, the improvement in housing stock, the availability of housing stock, all of those things are hard numbers that you can see in the past 3 years. Is it because they went through branding? Absolutely not. Has the branding system allowed the community to see all these different entities working together to improve them? And has it helped to change their self-esteem? Absolutely. So the big thing that I would ask is, if you are skeptical, simply allow the passionate organizations in the community to begin to deploy and allow the cooperation to work. Yes, sir.
I remember the Kiwanis Club. Kiwanis is doing a flying pancake breakfast downtown here this summer. And I think the city's already approved it. So we've got our materials that we're putting together to promote it. And it's got the Kiwanis logo on it.
Absolutely.
But before we go to print with that, it would be nothing to add the logo
Absolutely.
promoting the Main Street to just get that out.
Absolutely.
Because we're not going to be able to do it unless we're downtown doing it.
Exactly. And literally, the intention is, you know, every single logo that you saw tonight, they're yours. I'll be giving those to you saved in 5 different file formats. You will literally have every resource you need to integrate it. And the style guide will help you to know what in the world is the difference between a PNG and an EPS and a PDF. You know, because we understand most people have no clue what that means, but it's like, oh my God, do you have a logo that doesn't have a white box in the background? Yes, we're going to give you a logo without a white box in the background. So absolutely. The incorporating it in and building that pride around this idea of historic Lapeer and the community that we're proud of, that's exactly what we're shooting for. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
I really like the uniformity of unity is really the heart of every community, and that's what I'm all about is uniformity. Let's show that these organizations are working together and taking a step forward. Branding is really where this weight goes.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? Deb.
I just would like to say thank you so much for coming here
Thank you.
Come back.
Oh, I'll come visit for
Come
sure.
back at least once every year to see
Oh.
how we've grown.
I will tell you that I'm pretty sure that if for nothing else, just the barbecue and macaroni and cheese and wood chips will draw me back. It's got kind of a gravitational force of its own. So, but thank you, I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
I like, the couple of us in town, I think they, when we moved here, that was something, oh, that's pretty neat. But anyways, graphics, garbage can to me. It's just my perception of it,
Okay.
that's all.
Well, we'll make sure that.
I mean, I love the couple of us,
Yeah.
but I just think it was like a
Okay. I'll make sure that it's not garbage canning.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Honestly, I like the way it shows the unity of all the groups working together.
Great. Great. All right. Oh, we're
I was
good.
gonna say, things that we do work out, and as Elliot said, seeing that in my mind with a couple businesses down here, or how to combine that with our companies to show them that, and a lot of people know that, like you said, it comes through Lapeer, yeah, then Lapeer would never been downtown.
Right.
They draw them down here. When we first brought our first company down here, I wanted to be on 24 while traffic was, and I'm so blessed to be on the spot downtown and
Fantastic.
to pull people down here. So
Awesome.
it's just like you did a lot of good work and put a lot of good points out there and brought it with some comedy in it. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Captain.
I just want to say a couple of words.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
So I just want to thank Ben. I think it's amazing that somebody can come in, do all that work in literally like not even 48 hours, like 36 hours. And he has to sleep too and he has to eat. So I think it's an invaluable resource that we are getting because we're a Michigan Main Street community. And we wouldn't have had this otherwise. And so I really hope that as a partnership, we can all utilize all of these tools to be able to make us communicate better with our community, to bond us together. So thank you so much for doing this. It's